Good evening, folks. How are you? Welcome to the Bruce Snyder podcast. Good to see you. Hopefully, I got all my friends over there on Facebook who still remain over there, who'd like to follow me. Jumping aboard tonight. I'm checking out your comments right now in the Rumble section. So I'll keep those comments coming. If you're watching on Rumble, make sure you go ahead and give us a follow there and hit that like button. Same with on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up and a like on the video as well. It helps us a great deal. So thank you for tuning in tonight. I really do appreciate it. How is everyone tonight? Are you guys hanging in there? I certainly hope so. So I really thought that I would do a podcast tonight. We'll do a short one. We'll keep it within like probably an hour. I have a couple short videos to play and make a few comments on it. And I'll go to your comments over here. If you're on YouTube as well, you can go ahead and comment. I can bring up your comments like so at the bottom. Bad boy GTO. Hi, Bruce and Peeps UK in the house. I'm gonna take a guess, and I think this might be Mark across the pond there. So welcome to the show. Anyway, so I really do appreciate you guys tuning in. And as far as any late breaking news, the only thing that I did see before coming on the air, and I did post it to my social media, it looks like Nikki Haley is going to make some sort of announcement tomorrow at noon. Either she's stepping down or she's stepping up her game, and who knows what it's going to be. I have no idea. So we'll wait till tomorrow and find out. It's really, as far as my opinion goes on that, I don't think she belongs in the race this late in the game. She's only hurting things right now. So I don't think there's any. If there's any other breaking news, you guys can let me know in the comments as well. I'll take a quick look before we get started here. The reason I do this, I take a few minutes here. I give people time to get on board with us. So if you're watching on Rumble, or YouTube for that matter, on your big screen at home, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know you can't hit that like button, but if you're on a smartphone, like I said, hit that follow or subscribe button, depending on which platform you're on, and give us a like. Okay. So what I have loaded up, I'm going to have a short, two short videos. One of them is going to be Tucker Carlson. It's not the Tucker Carlson that you've seen that was released, which was 5 minutes long, with about Julian Assange when he was over in the UK, when he went to Belmarsh prison. This is the extended one that I subscribed to tuckercarlson.com, and I took it off there to play it on the show tonight. So you get to see that, and you get to see him with Stella Assange as well. I thought about it tonight. I'm like, how do I start this whole thing? I can't go and do an entire, I have to do like a Cliff Notes type of situation here and present a couple videos. One in particular allows you to get a perspective on things. It allows you to form your own opinion. I think this late in the stage of the game, there is absolutely no reason that you should not be informed about Julian Assange. And it still amazes me till this day because I personally have promoted, if that's the correct word, the release of Julian Assange. I've been an advocate for that for years now. I posted so many things time and time again that it should allow many people to, even if you weren't informed on the situation of Julian Assange, it gave you plenty of opportunity to go down that rabbit hole, if you will, and to inform yourself. And here we are. This is the eve of the extradition hearing, which takes place starting tomorrow morning. Which I think, correct me if I'm wrong. I know I got Mark on YouTube over there at the High Court. I think you guys are 5 hours ahead, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Probably I'll start early in the morning. I know a couple independent reporters that I follow, one in particular, who will be there on the ground and will be there at the actual court, will be reporting in real time. And I will piggyback off of his information, and I will bring everybody up to date, real time, um, from the court hearings. So this is his final appeal for extradition to the United States. I have been, many of you have, okay? We have been banned on social media left and right. Now, if you're just joining right now, maybe it's the first time you're here. I have a fairly, obviously, I have a fairly, for the most part, just about a conservative crowd, who listens to my podcast, who really follows my news reporting on social media. Um, I am well aware that there are different stances politically, even folks outside the U.S. as well, when it comes to this case. I am well aware of Julian Assange's wife's stance. I don't agree with everything she has to say, but for the most part, I agree with most of it. But that's irrelevant because our political affiliations, our political beliefs, etc., should have nothing to do with this. This is a come together moment right now. I think this is, I know this is, uh, this is bigger than uh, Donald Trump winning the presidency. And I know that's a big statement, but if Julian Assange is not freed, we won't be free either. You have independent reporters like now Tucker Carlson, biggest name in all of journalism in the entire world, is now an independent reporter. That's how Julian Assange started out. I um I got into a quick background, and this is important. It goes along with the show. I went to broadcast school. I didn't want to be a journalist per se, but I worked in broadcast television. I learned everything about the news. And then after my education, I worked out in the field quite a bit. And long story short, I love behind the scenes. Now, I did make a commitment. Well, not a commitment, but I did make sort of a promise to myself, if you will. You can understand this is a different time. Back in the '90s, I didn't want to get into news per se because I knew back then how bad it was. Now I did do many things for news outlets, but they weren't uh, politically motivated or driven in some way. They were feel good stories or that type of situation, or maybe it was like one in particular. I remember going to Pittsburgh and we did the whole thing on. We had to get it on by the 6 o'clock news. It was for antibiotics for a local pharmacy, for a local grocery store, a big savings and all that. So those are the stories I did. Um, but I never wanted to get into, being that guy, having a camera on my shoulder, working for CNN or somebody like that. And I say CNN, now it's laughable today, but back then it was a different story. So, but here we are, and here I am right now, sitting in front of you, doing this as I've always stated. It's uncomfortable. I am not, and I'll never get comfortable doing what I do here. I try to just, I feel like I'm out of my comfort zone, per se, and by doing this. So, and why do I do that? Because I've said it before publicly that, well, once the whole Julian Assange story broke, and then as time went on, I realized how he was being persecuted for the truth. I realized, well, I can get back involved doing that. And it wasn't obviously until I started seeing, the corruption, um, with when Donald Trump came in to run for the presidency for 2016. And then it was shortly after that, after he won, I decided that, okay, it's time for me to take a stand. And then technology changed, and here we are. We have access to where I can broadcast pretty much around the world, um, and bring you information, um, if you will. This is one of those subjects that is very near and dear to my heart, and I think it's extremely, I know it's extremely vital. It is vital to freedom of speech and freedom of press. Uh, Julian Assange was he was an independent journalist too, and he um, he did everything from the very beginning. Obviously he had a vision. He can be considered as a controversial figure in the world of journalism, or a prominent figure for that matter. And and people label him as a whistleblower as well. Um, he's the founder of WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is an organization that's released numerous classified documents and information, and it's had major impacts on global politics and international relations. Julian is currently facing potential extradition to the U.S., and that begins tomorrow. The final court hearing, 2 days it's scheduled for. Um, and he's facing extradition from the U.S. from the United Kingdom. He's been imprisoned there since 2019. The U.S. government's charged him with numerous counts under the Espionage Act, which led to a lengthy prison sentence, which could, if he is convicted, which is 175 years. It's unthinkable. Recently, there's been significant developments in his case, per se. A crucial ruling, if you will, from the Australian Parliament passed a motion urging the U.S. and the U.K. to end the prosecution of Julian Assange and allow him to return home. Many of Assange's supporters argue that his continued detention and potential extradition to the U.S. could have severe consequences for press freedom and the public's right to access information. Meanwhile, his critics believe that the release of the classified information has put national security at risk. And with his critics there, now here's the thing, I'm going to be careful about this. His critics, there have been critics, if you know the history. Now, I can do this. I thought about this tonight. How do I do this? And I don't want to influence you or say things. I want to keep things very unbiased, if you will. But if you go back to the beginning, go all the way back to 2010, there are names who many of you look up to and highly respect that called for the death and execution of Julian Assange. Yes, there's names out there now that I know for a fact that you put up there on a pedestal, if you will. That's the very difficult part about this entire thing. I have my views. That's almost irrelevant tonight. I'm not going to tell you what those are. The reason I'm not going to tell you what those are is because I'm still remaining on the sidelines, and I want to see this take place. I want to see what happens with the court case. And if memory serves me correctly, I don't think we get a ruling right away. We have 2 days of the hearing, and then we got a little gap before we get the final ruling, which I don't see. I'm going to be honest with you, unless something has happened within the ranks, I don't see this turning out good for Julian Assange. This is where it's very extremely difficult for me, because I have to make a decision after this. where I stand politically with my current views and beliefs. I'll just say that, because it's going to have an impact on me if this turns out to be bad. I'm not going to get into the whys, and it's too premature for me to say how that's going to change views for me and what views are going to change. But I just know the significance of this case with Julian Assange, and he's not even charged. That's the whole thing. With the upcoming court hearing, the world's watching closely, folks, and they're waiting to see if Julian will be extradited to the U.S. or if he'll be allowed to return to his home country of Australia. Many are hoping for a positive outcome, and for Julian, someone who's dedicated his life to the truth. So with that being said, this is why I always push support independent journalism. So here we go. We're going to play 2 videos, okay? They're both of them are about 15 minutes each. We'll play the first one. It's going to give you a little view of, I had to sift through many videos, and I'm like, which one do I play? Because there's some videos, it's very difficult because there's some videos out there, they're twisted in some ways. Everybody has an agenda. But if you're familiar with Julian, and this will give you an idea as well. But if you're not familiar with Julian, or if you are familiar with Julian, this should be a pretty decent video, and it's one of the latest, and it's up to date. So let's give this one a listen.
7 years in a London embassy.
Julian is the most famous political prisoner in the world.
The last 4 years in a British jail. Julian Assange, the hero.
What I think he's done is spoken truth to power.
The villain.
I'm not for the death penalty, so if I'm not for the death penalty, the only one to do it, illegally shoot the son of a...
The journalist.
If Julian Assange could be extradited to the United States and jailed for the rest of his life, then any journalist could face a similar fate.
He has now seemingly exhausted his legal challenges. The Australian hacker with a signature silver coif who burst into the public's consciousness over a decade ago via his web platform WikiLeaks that took secrets and made them public. The release of this video.
Light them all up.
And then the files.
I absolutely condemn the placement of this information on the WikiLeaks website.
These cables.
We have an active, ongoing criminal investigation with regard to this matter.
And her emails.
WikiLeaks! I love WikiLeaks!
But how much has been done in the public interest or simply his own? Trading freedom for freedom of information. So what is Julian Assange actually accused of? What punishment could he face? And should Australia fight to bring him home? "2010 was a huge year for WikiLeaks and its editor-in-chief, Julian Assange. A mostly unknown website. By the end of the year, it would be labelled the most dangerous in the world. The Iraq War had been going on for 7 years by this point. It was a remote conflict, and for the international coalition, a battle based on optics. From shock and awe to mission accomplished, pictures were streamed across cable news showing Operation Iraqi Freedom live from the battlefront. This was not one of those videos, and a warning, this is hard to watch. In April of 2010, WikiLeaks released this video on its website, titled Collateral Murder. It's a recording of a US Apache gun site as it strafes over Baghdad in 2007. It shows 18 people, including 2 Reuters journalists, walking through a courtyard. The camera being carried by one of the journalists is wrongly identified as a weapon.
That's a weapon, yeah.
The order is given to engage.
Light them all up.
And the helicopter opens fire.
Keep shooting.
After the volley of shots, a van pulls up to rescue any survivors. before it too is fired upon.
Clear. Come on.
It's a shocking sight and in jarring contrast with what we hear.
Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
Later, it's revealed the van was carrying 2 children.
Oh, it's their fault for bringing their kids to a battle. That's right.
Reuters, the employer of the 2 journalists, had tried to get a hold of the footage under the Freedom of Information Act, but was denied by the US government.
Namir was 22 years old. Said was 40 years old. Both were much loved. And in an instant, gone. We had no idea what had really happened.
The video WikiLeaks released is highly produced, edited, subtitled, supplemented with eyewitness reports and beginning with a George Orwell quote. It's clearly meant to illustrate a political point of view and not merely to inform. Assange claims to have decrypted and published the video in the interest of transparency. The official military investigation cleared the soldiers in the video of any wrongdoing, stating that the crew acted within the rules of engagement. However, 2 months later, the Army intelligence analyst accused of leaking the footage, Private Chelsea Manning, then known as Bradley Manning, was arrested. But WikiLeaks didn't stop there. That release was in April 2010. In July, they published tens of thousands of secret US military reports about the war in Afghanistan, dubbed the Afghan War Diary, sending copies to major news outlets ahead of the drop. The New York Times called it an unvarnished and grim picture of the Afghan war, and along with the Spiegel and the Guardian as news outlets, unanimous in their belief that there is a justified public interest in the material. Also adding, they have agreed that they would not publish especially sensitive information in the classified material, like the names of the US military's Afghan informants, or information that could create additional security risks for soldiers stationed in Afghanistan. But here's the thing, WikiLeaks made no attempt to redact any of the names of Afghan civilians, putting those who helped coalition forces in danger. It was an issue that drove a wedge between Assange and his WikiLeaks colleagues.
We had this really complicated situation with our 3 collaborating newspapers, the New York Times, Guardian and Der Spiegel, where we found out he made promises about redacting part of that publication, but no work was put into these redactions at all.
This was a secret document dump, laid bare for anyone to see. WikiLeaks made 76,000 pages available on their website, claiming to have withheld an additional 15,000 emails in an effort of harm minimisation. And then, October 2010, the largest leak in US military history. 400,000 classified files on the Iraq War. They detail the atrocities of war, involvement of Iraqi security forces in the torture of prisoners of war, document higher civilian death tolls, and describe Iran's support for Iraqi insurgents. Again, the release organised by Assange for maximum effect, granting access to select media outlets ahead of time, and then orchestrating a media frenzy to accompany the release online.
It really is the most extraordinary compendium of war that has ever been released.
All in the name of transparency. Still in 2010, November, WikiLeaks went on to post 251,000 US diplomatic cables, covering all interactions between US embassies from 1966 to 2010. Every message, from analysing nuclear threats to critiquing local governments, to high-level handling of intelligence assets and supporting of dictatorships, all the way down to embarrassing details of how they view other world leaders.
It's really almost apocalyptic to have 250,000 cables lost. It affects our relations with every country in the world and puts sources of information, not only government sources, but human rights activists and dissidents and others at great risk.
In what they saw as an evolving method of release, Assange claimed the documents would be fed slowly and carefully, with confidential names blacked out. He even claimed to reach out to the State Department to help sort through the material.
The request was made to Assange to redact this material so these lives could be protected. He and his colleagues were pretty much contemptuous of this and said, well, you know, let the chips fall where they may. They weren't interested in negotiating, they were interested in revealing.
And they did reveal, with all 251,000 documents released online and uncensored for the world to see.
And there is nothing brave about sabotaging the peaceful relations between nations on which our common security depends.
So is this journalism? This was opening a fire hose of classified material to anyone who wanted it. Is it still in the public interest? Or had Assange assumed the role of provocateur?
So are you a revolutionary?
Well, we'll see. If we end up with a decent revolution, then perhaps others can make that judgment.
2010 draws to a dramatic close with an arrest warrant issued for Julian Assange from Sweden over rape and sexual assault allegations that he denies. Interpol follows up, issuing a red notice for his extradition. Assange hands himself into UK police, pleads his innocence and is granted bail. By 2012, though, the sexual assault case has gone all the way to the UK Supreme Court, which rules Assange should be extradited to Sweden for further questioning.
The extradition proceeding to Sweden, which is occurring in a very strange and unusual way, is actually an attempt to get me into a jurisdiction which will then make it easier to extradite me to the United States.
So he breaches bail and enters the Ecuadorian embassy. An idealistic stand for press freedom, or perhaps a distraction from a media crackdown at home, Ecuador's president grants diplomatic asylum to Julian Assange. And the US pushes ahead with its case against Chelsea Manning, the intelligence analyst who leaked the military material. She's charged under the country's Espionage Act, convicted and sentenced to 35 years jail. Julian Assange remained in refuge, granted asylum by the Ecuadorian government for the next 7 years. This patch of Ecuador in London is where he meets Stella Morris, the woman who'll become his wife, and fathers their 2 children. He remains inside, locked in his diplomatic sanctuary. While on the other side of the Atlantic, the US presidential race was reaching a crescendo.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Turns out Russia was listening. As highlighted in the Mueller report, almost immediately after this request, a hacking and phishing campaign was launched by Russian operatives against members of America's Democratic Party email accounts. 20,000 pages of emails, mostly stolen from the inbox of Clinton campaign chair John Podesta, were drip-fed out on WikiLeaks in the months leading up to the election.
As confirmed just today by WikiLeaks.
It's been amazing what's coming out on WikiLeaks. They want to distract us from WikiLeaks.
The wonder of WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks has done a job on her, hasn't it?
And while none of the emails were that explosive, it added to a narrative that Clinton was a calculated political operator with funding from big corporate donors. And that was seized upon by her opponent, who ultimately won out the general election. Julian Assange's role again called out as an act of espionage.
Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government.
Assange and his ilk make common cause with dictators today. Yes, they try unsuccessfully to cloak themselves and their actions in the language of liberty and privacy. But in reality, they champion nothing but their own celebrity. Their currency is clickbait. Their moral compass, non-existent. Their mission, personal self-aggrandizement through destruction of Western values.
In Ecuador, a new president there isn't so sympathetic to Assange's cause. Lenin Moreno's government sees him as a rude and expensive guest who's hampering their relationship with the US.
Han llevado la situación a un punto en que el asilo del señor Assange es insostenible e inviable.
By 2019, Assange is removed from the embassy by UK police, who arrest him on behalf of the US, before he's transferred to Belmarsh prison.
No one is above the law. Julian Assange is no hero. He is hidden from the truth for years and years, and it is right that his future should be decided in the British judicial system.
After conducting a comprehensive assessment, the evidence is not strong enough to form the basis of filing an indictment.
The Swedish investigation is dropped, and it's at this point the extent of the US charges are laid bare. 18 criminal charges, including obtaining, receiving and disclosing classified information. The obtaining part is a fairly low-level hacking charge and refers to a single count of Assange agreeing to help Private Manning break a password for a US Department of Defence computer, something they ultimately failed to achieve. But the receiving and disclosing parts make up the bulk of the charges, 17 of the 18 counts. And in this, Assange is accused of breaching the Espionage Act of 1917 by conspiring with Chelsea Manning and publishing the material online. The charges could see him jailed, effectively for life. The Espionage Act is intended to stop American military officials from recruiting or aiding the enemy during wartime. But this is an Australian civilian who was given these documents while in a foreign country. And as for the publishing of these classified documents, how do they prosecute him without prosecuting The Times, Post and Guardian for the same thing, publishing stories based on the leaks after being given early access by Assange? But the US didn't view him as a journalist in the same way. The charges point to him being a hacker or data dumper, a digital pariah with a goal to discredit the US government.
The US government, in terms of its attack on WikiLeaks, has tried to construct a theory which, if permitted, will be the end of national security journalism, not just in the United States, but also about the United States.
Chelsea Manning says she will refuse to testify against Assange. She's now free after having her sentence commuted by Barack Obama.
Chelsea Manning has served a tough prison sentence.
Quiet diplomacy has been the approach of consecutive Australian governments.
There is nothing to be served by his ongoing incarceration, and I am concerned about Mr. Assange's mental health.
Julian Assange's support in Parliament crosses party lines.
This was always political. It remains political. I think the solution is political.
This Australian citizen who didn't commit a crime in the United States is in Australia.
Jailing an Australian citizen whose only crime was telling the truth and being a journalist.
And Joe Biden's planned visit to Australia presented an opportunity to plead his case. But the Biden visit was cancelled at the last minute, swamped by the US debt ceiling crisis. Julian Assange is almost out of legal options to stop his extradition to the US.
Enough is enough. This needs to be brought to a conclusion.
Yeah, to me, it's the sheer hypocrisy of the US trying to extradite an Australian called Julian Assange to the US to be jailed potentially for up to 175 years for showing the truth of what happened in Iraq. It's one of the greatest travesties of the modern era.
We call on the US, we call on the UK to let him out of prison, drop the charges, let him be rejoined with his family, let him come home.
His fight has entered the final stage. A diplomatic solution, which has so far eluded him, could be his only hope.
Okay. So I hope that piece there helped you a little bit. There were a couple little things in there that I disagreed with. You might actually be able to catch those with the next video. I'm going to play Tucker Carlson here with Julian's wife, Stella Assange. And this is the video where he just went to Belmarsh prison. So one thing, and I can watch these over and over. Somebody's asking me in the comments, which Assange movie do I recommend? I don't really know. I don't watch most of those movies that are on Prime or whatever. I know there's a lot of documentaries out there. But I like the small pieces that I find online. Maybe I'll look into that and I'll post it on my social media. The only movie right now that is really important is with Julian's father, called Ithaca. But You cannot get that here in the United States. So if you're in the UK, I urge you to go and check out Ithaca with Julian Assange's father. So that's a good one there. So I'm going to take you now with one more video, and then it's only like 15 minutes. Tucker Carlson's with Stella Assange, and they're going to Belmarsh Prison. So, and they're in a like a trailer RV, and it's pretty good. I like it. I like the you're gonna have an immediate reaction of Tucker Carlson when he just gets done visiting Julian Assange. Of course, you're not going to see that visit because cameras aren't allowed inside prison when you're visiting. Nothing is, for that matter. So let's check this one out here. Here is Tucker Carlson with Stella Assange just recently going to Belmarsh Prison to visit Julian Assange.
Assange is one of the greatest journalists of our age. He spent his entire adult life bringing previously concealed facts to the public about what our leaders are doing. That is the very definition of journalism. Yet Julian Assange is not a hero in America's newsrooms. He's an enemy. Assange made the mistake of offending the media's real constituency, which is not the public, but the powerful. For doing this, journalists accuse Assange of being what they are, a political operative posing as a reporter. In 2010, Assange and his organization, WikiLeaks, published an enormous cache of secret documents that revealed what the U.S. government had been doing in Iraq. Included was a 38-minute gun sight video that depicted Apache helicopters mowing down a group of civilians in Baghdad, including 2 Reuters employees.
There's more that keep walking by, and one of them has a weapon. Roger, receive. See all those people standing down there? Oh, yeah. That's a weapon. Yeah. Hotel 26, straight yours, 1-8. Is that an RPG? All right, we got a guy with an RPG. How about a fire? Oh, we got a guy shooting. Now he's behind the building. Come on, fire. Hey, Roger. Keep shooting. Keep shooting. All right, we just engaged all 8 individuals.
The video was a problem for the government because officials had lied about what happened that day. At one point, the Pentagon claimed the video didn't even exist. Assange proved that it did. A few years later, Assange upended a presidential race by publishing a trove of internal emails from the Democratic Party. Democrats claimed the emails had been hacked by the Russian government, but they hadn't been. That was a lie. The emails had been leaked from within the DNC itself, almost certainly by a disgruntled employee. Those emails proved that Hillary Clinton's campaign had rigged the 2016 Democratic primary against Bernie Sanders.
Okay, I'd like to interrupt for just a moment here. Okay, I want to keep this going. I'd like to inform you what they're talking about, and this is why I said you might notice the difference. I wasn't going to interrupt, but after watching this again in real time, I feel that it's important to inform the audience right now what Tucker's talking about. The first video I told you about, okay, this is where I said I didn't agree with things. They claim that Russia, after they cut that of Trump saying, "I hope Russia, you're listening," and then we had Russia, and we all know about that. But Tucker just told you, and he's going to say it again at the 14-minute mark in this video because I marked it down on my notes. That the leak did not come from Russia. It came from within the DNC, from possibly a disgruntled employee. And now we know who that employee is, and that is Seth Rich. So this is how things are all tied together. And if you know the Seth Rich story, Seth Rich was murdered walking in the streets of D.C. I don't know if he was, I think it was late at night. I don't know if he was coming home from the office or a restaurant or something. Irregardless, he was shot and killed in cold blood, and they didn't even take his wallet or his watch or anything like that. So it was murder for hire. That's where we can go back to the Mueller report and Hillary Clinton. That is a perfect freeze frame right now. A perfect freeze frame right now on your screen of what I'm talking about. And I guarantee you, I put my life on it. And this is not like the left coming out about Alexei Navalny this week saying that Putin killed him. You have no proof. Well, technically, I have no proof, right? But I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that woman on your screen is directly responsible for the death, murder for hire of Seth Rich. Let's continue.
It was the scoop of the decade, but it was only one of many that Julian Assange broke. For the crime of upstaging them and embarrassing their patrons, the media hated Julian Assange even more.
And especially with Assange, what bothers me the most is that he hides under this sort of broad definition of a journalist. And we have to come out and say that this is not, stealing and using disinformation for a foreign government is not journalism.
This is a no-brainer. This guy, Julian Assange, directed and led an organization that led to the largest breach of classified information in U.S. history. This is not some do-gooder whistleblower.
Assange is a criminal. He's damaged national security. Assange isn't a journalist.
He's a criminal, squeaked the faithful servants of power. Embarrassed governments around the world agreed. The government of Sweden, acting in concert with British authorities, charged Assange with a fake sex crime. He's a rapist, they said. Global media amplified the lie. Ultimately, the charges were dropped for lack of evidence. But by that point, Julian Assange was a prisoner. He'd been driven into internal exile in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he sought political asylum. He spent more than 7 years there, unable to leave. Then, in 2017, Assange broke his last big story. WikiLeaks revealed the existence of an illegal CIA spying program. Assange withheld most of the details of that program so as not to compromise American national security. But the story was still deeply humiliating to the CIA. In Washington, CIA Director Mike Pompeo decided to murder him. Pompeo discussed with his deputies how the CIA might kidnap Assange from the embassy in London or poison him inside. That is not conjecture. Multiple witnesses heard Mike Pompeo say that. At the time, keep in mind, Julian Assange had not been charged with any crime in the United States. Mike Pompeo considered it a death penalty offense to embarrass the CIA. You may be asking, is any of this legal? Can federal appointees use tax dollars to kill people who annoy them? Well, not technically. Mike Pompeo committed a felony, conspiracy to commit murder. And yet somehow, Mike Pompeo is not in prison. Instead, he's the toast of the donor class, a friend and advisor to the most powerful people in America. It's Julian Assange who's in prison for the crime of offending Mike Pompeo. Assange is currently being held behind bars by the British government, which has not charged him with any crime. Assange now sits in the most fortified penitentiary in the UK, Belmarsh, where every murderer in London is held. He's been there for more than 4 years, trapped in solitary confinement, cut off from his wife and 2 children, wasting away alone among killers and mental patients, and awaiting extradition to the United States for trial. Assange has been charged in the U.S. under the century-old Espionage Act, a transparently unconstitutional law which is used almost exclusively to punish political crimes. Yet Julian Assange has never committed espionage. Nor does the U.S. government have any real interest in trying him under that law. His current incarceration is the whole point. Torture Assange to death in jail so he will never again speak publicly. It's all so grotesque and so immoral that it's hard to believe it's actually happening in public view. Belmarsh authorities will not allow Assange to be interviewed, lest his case bring more embarrassment to the CIA. But we decided to travel there to see him anyway. It's early in the morning, the sun has just come up. We're driving through London to Belmarsh Prison to see Julian Assange. We're with his wife, Stella, in a bus. It's raining. And we're going to try to get through the cordon of maximum security guards and administrators to see him, not for an interview. No cameras are allowed, but for a conversation. How hard is it to get from the gate to see him?
Well, it's a process. So initially, you're in an external building called the Visitor Center, and they check your ID, and they take your fingerprints. They give you a badge, and you have to leave everything behind. Everything. I mean, you can't take a watch or a handkerchief or anything like that, a pen. And then you go into the main building, And then there are airlocks. So you go through the first airlock, they take your fingerprint again, they check your badge, look at your VO, it's called visiting order. And then they let you through to the kind of airport security area. So you put your shoes, your belts, jacket on in an X-ray machine. Then they check you first with you go through an arch. Then they check you with a wand under your feet and front and back. Then you go to a pat-down search, and they look inside your mouth, behind your ears, and your hair, and then pat you down under your feet as well. And then you can put your shoes back on. Then you go through another airlock, and then you cross a yard, and then you get into the interior building. Check your fingerprints again. Then there's a dog search. And once the dog search is through, then you're through to the visiting hall where they take your fingerprints again.
Are you filled with rage toward the people who are doing this?
I'm beyond rage. You know, I think I don't understand the cruelty. I mean, I don't understand how people can be human beings and actually go along with it or drive it, you know. I don't understand how a human being can do this to another human being. And just the effect it has on Julian, what is being done to him, you know. He doesn't have contact with the outside world, and the little contact he has is with, you know, very serious criminals, and violent people, and, you know, dangerous people, and that he can't be with his family, that we're only able to see him a few hours, 1 or 2 hours a week. It's just, you know, it's kind of, rage doesn't describe it because I'm in the middle of it, and I just cannot understand it.
So we're going into prison to be fingerprinted 4 times and searched and sniffed by dogs in order to visit the notorious terrorist criminal Julian Assange, who has not actually been charged with anything. We're heading out. Oh! Say a prayer.
We're going to do a sit down, but any quick thoughts?
Well, that's just a total outrage. I mean, it's a total outrage that they're holding that man who hasn't committed or even been charged with a crime in this country. I mean, that's a, you know, maximum security prison filled with murderers, and the people who reside there, the inmates, are treated like animals. And he's not an animal. He's a journalist who has committed no crime. And so anyone who's in favor of that, anyone who supports his continued torture, is your enemy. He's the enemy of free expression, of free speech, of the basic liberties that used to define the United States. So, you know, the people who support that should have to answer for it, in my opinion. It's disgusting what they're doing. Disgusting.
Assange looks like press photographs of him, maybe older, pale. He hasn't been outside in 13 years. Bearded, longish hair. He's a big man, tall. He seemed better physically than press accounts had led me to believe. I keep reading that he's ailing. I'm not his doctor. I just spent, you know, a little over an hour talking to him, but I thought he seemed very focused. He seemed much more cognitively dialed in than I was led to believe. Dressed in gray sweatshirt and sweatpants, prison issued. He's a prisoner. All the prisoners in the room had fluorescent yellow armbands to signify they were the prisoners. And, you know, I was very focused on the conversation with him because there's a lot I wanted to ask him and a lot I've been thinking about as I've watched his case over the last, almost 20 years. So I had a lot of questions, but it was hard not to notice, if you've never been in a prison meeting room, there's a lot of human drama unfolding all around you. And little children, he has little children. He and Stella have little kids. And it's just, it's heartbreaking to see prisoners with their children or their wives. And as someone who's been married for over 30 years, the idea of being separated from your wife for any period of time is, it makes you feel claustrophobic thinking about it. We talked about why he is in prison. And my first question to him was, what do you think this is actually about, since you haven't been accused of a crime? And he said something that really struck me. And I think, having spent my life in Washington, is absolutely right. He said he first became famous when WikiLeaks published documents and videos that the US government had kept secret from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They were gravely embarrassing to the Pentagon. But that wasn't the red line. The red line was several years later when WikiLeaks published information about surveillance by the CIA. And so I asked him directly, are you aware of anyone being harmed or killed on the basis of information that he published? He said, of course not. And he said it in a sincere way. Like, by the way, I think if people were killed because of his publishing, because of the stories that he put online, he would feel bad about it. He seems like a humane person. He withheld information about CIA because he didn't want to get people hurt. He famously published the contents of Hillary Clinton's email account going back to the late 2010s, 2009, 2010, as I remember. And there were enormously embarrassing details in these emails, including the text of her suck-up speeches to Goldman Sachs. And at the time, she was pretending to be a friend of the people or whatever. This was really damaging to her, and she was enraged by it. And he was also at the center of really one of the baffling stories of our time, which was the leak of the emails from the Democratic National Committee, which were blamed on Russia. Russia clearly had nothing to do with it. There's no evidence Russia had anything to do with it at all. And I think there are quite a few indications that those emails were leaked by a DNC employee who was mad that the Hillary Clinton campaign was being helped by the DNC and the Bernie Sanders campaign was being hurt. Very interesting story with a lot of lying and potentially some other things. But I asked him, when you published these emails, did you realize how powerful Hillary Clinton was? We had a conversation about that. And I said, looking back, do you regret doing that? He goes, honestly, it was fun. And I love that.
Okay. So somebody said in the comment, holy crap, just putting this all together. Thank you. Good. That's exactly was the purpose of, again, I put out quite a bit over the years about all this, and putting, I figure, on the eve of the court hearing, which is just hours away, to put something together, little, like I said, it was kind of like a crash course, Cliff Notes type of situation here. But yeah, and you see the two different videos. It depends who produced these videos. I did purposely select that one because I knew that they said about Russia did it. And here we are with, Tucker. And I knew right away, I'm like, well, they didn't go bombing Russia. They killed a young man by the name of Seth Rich over this. And that's where the leak came from. Yes, it's Seth Rich, who apparently leaked things to WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. But you'll notice Tucker, and I'll explain why, Tucker Carlson had to, he's not allowed to say Seth Rich's name. If you notice that, he said a DNC employee. Well, Tucker worked at Fox. Fox was sued by the Rich family because they felt they were pushing a conspiracy theory because they were questioning his murder. Like, I'm free and at liberty to say right now. Well, at least I think so. But they got sued and they can no longer talk about Seth Rich. And they're not going to be able to, you're never going to hear anything about Seth Rich on Fox News. Then you got to question yourself. You got to question that and say, where did that come from? I mean, who pushed the Seth Rich family to sue Fox News over conspiracies, right? You can form your own opinion. You probably know exactly what I'm thinking, and I know what you're thinking. Money talks. We all know that. Killing. They haven't killed Julian Assange. It's very disturbing. It's very hard, difficult when you see that piece about Mike Pompeo, because then, obviously, I mean, if you're thinking like this has been a while now. This didn't break tonight. You question things, okay? In no way, shape, or form am I questioning President Trump giving Mike Pompeo. Now, this came at the time when Pompeo was head of the CIA. I am well aware, just like you are, that Donald Trump was misled. So much was done behind his back because look at it now. Look how bad it is now. Okay. He didn't know who to trust. This is why him getting into a presidency again is going to be quite interesting. In no way, shape, or form am I blaming President Trump. I know he didn't pardon Edward Snowden and didn't pardon Julian Assange. I still want time to play out, and I'd like to see what's going to happen. Earlier in the show, I said about putting people on a pedestal. I'll give you an example, okay? And I'll give you an example, and I'll tell you what I did, and I can agree, because 2010 was a different time. A lot of people were calling for the execution of Julian Assange back then. And I said, lots of names that you guys follow, maybe put on a pedestal. If I had to give you one name, just one that comes to mind is Mike Huckabee was on Fox News saying we need to execute Julian Assange. I have footage of that. That's old news. But I decided to do a excuse me. I decided to do a dive into that a little bit over the years now, because now it's 14 years. I looked on Mike Huckabee's past related articles and things that he had posted. And certain stories are gone now. They've been erased. I don't think it's trying to cover up because you said that. I think over time, people had a change of view. That's what it is. I am not pointing the finger at anybody. I wasn't in that boat back then, but I can understand completely how you're talking post 9/11. We're still 2010. We're still we're at war, and we're still pretty much patriotic. We're borderline probably questioning why are we over there so long. I get that. But at the same time, we weren't in the position we are, which is the Great Awakening, if you will, right now. And many of us have come to this point of right now up to 2024 of awakening, and everybody awoke at a time in their life. Maybe it was just maybe it was many years ago. Maybe it was during the Trump presidency. Maybe it was the latter Trump. Maybe it was last week. I don't know. But many people have come around, just like with Edward Snowden as well. I put these guys in the same boat. And I used to have a Facebook page. I had to change my name. I had 39 accounts gone now. And I said, I need an alias name. And I said, what better name than going with the two guys? And I used to call myself Julian Edward, as in Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. And that was my online name. But again, it didn't work out. As a matter of fact, the Rumble page you're on now was originally created under the name Julian Edward, because there was a couple of years where that's where people knew me. I was just hiding from the Facebook overlords over there. So in the chat section, for example, I could do that right now in the chat section. I'll comment right now, and see on Rumble. If you're on Rumble right now, post a comment, and I can't change it because it comes up Julian Edward. I just commented, and unfortunately, Rumble does not, once you create a name, they don't let you change it. But I'm okay with that. I like the backstory behind it. But I hope you got something out of that tonight. So again, if you're just joining, my job will be important. It's important every day. It'll be important going into tomorrow morning. I'm going to be winding down here because I want to get up early. I want to get some sleep. I'd like to be up by about probably by 5:30. I think I'd like to be up, maybe 5. And I'm going to start monitoring the court over there. And because obviously they're ahead of time, so I want to get a jump on things. So I'll be up early tomorrow, monitoring things and posting as I go along and keeping all of you informed. I ask everybody if they could kindly share my this video or any news I post over to Facebook, because I know there's a lot of people over there. I did post something yesterday, and this goes along with Julian Assange right now, if you ask me, and censorship. What they're trying to do is it's censorship at the highest level. And with me over at Facebook, I had posted that my algorithms, when I got 2 weeks ago today, I was suspended from Facebook. And my algorithms, my analytics at Twitter, I posted a screenshot. They went up, and up, and up. But then the following week, slightly down, 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 and down. So I think a lot of people, which I'm incredibly grateful and humble that you jumped over to X and followed me. I ask you to keep doing that. Come over there. Give you're pulling away too fast. Yes, it's a little bit of different format. Okay, it's not like the fluffy Facebook. Unless you just want to stay over there, and don't take this as a shot. But if you just want to stay over there and post your pictures of your dinner and your pets and stuff, that's the place to be. But if you really want information, okay, head on over to X for sure, or Telegram for that matter. I'm also on Pop Talk, which has replaced Facebook for me. I ask you to follow me over at Pop Talk as well. My links are in the both videos you're watching right now. I believe the links are in there, if I'm not mistaken, to my social media accounts. But the information is definitely on X. Elon Musk didn't. He overspent to buy a platform, not because he's an evil guy, because he's trying to restore free speech, and he's way smarter than me, and obviously, and he could see that where civilization is headed if that platform was not purchased by him. He had that opportunity to make a change. Can you imagine right now if Twitter was still owned by the original regime, and now Facebook, and then we got nowhere to go. This is quite alarming. So Julian Assange, same thing, and he was just a middleman. This is my opinion for him, and he put out this information that you just watched. What's different? What is different than me posting what Julian Assange put out, and then I go to post it, or the New York Times, or the New York Post, or the Wall Street Journal, or the Washington Post? Why are they not sitting in prison? They're just as guilty for sharing information. But the United States, what they're doing is they're making an example out of a person who they keep labeling as not a journalist, because he's not part of their club, just like myself. I'm on a really low level, but I'm doing the same exact thing right now. sharing information, making people aware, sharing what people, whistleblowers come out. Okay, I'm going to share it to my audience. I'm going to get it out there. Audience. I just made a cardinal. I don't like to call audience, and just my followers. I guess it is an audience now, being on a podcast. But say a prayer for Julian tonight. What's really important is free speech is on the line and freedom of press is on the line. They're not going to them. Okay, I'm just going to say it the way I think it. Them killing Jeffrey Epstein is not the same as them taking out Julian Assange or Donald Trump, for that matter, because they're not going to make him a martyr. Getting rid of Epstein, nobody can care. Nobody care less. We can all care less. So, yeah, I think there's there, and plus, what is so important about the Julian Assange case right now is the public awareness. If it faded off all the way back in 2010, if it faded out of the limelight, and citizens around the world, here in America, the UK, everywhere, if they did not continue their vital support for Julian Assange and kept the news coming and using social media and putting it out there, we would have forgot about him in our consciousness, our subconscious, and we would have been at a point now like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. Whatever happened to him? Oh, he died. Oh, that's too bad. Thank God for patriots all around the world raising awareness and fighting for Julian Assange. This is why they have not killed him. They just keep extending and dragging it out, in hopes that he'll drop dead in prison. That's their game plan. Free speech is on the line. So much is on the line. This extradition case and the re-election of Donald Trump is the most important thing. The two most important things, in my personal opinion, for civilization right now. Either we're going to fall into 1,000 years of darkness and be under complete control, government control, call it what you will, communist control, or something's going to give. I'm on the latter part that something is definitely going to give. I still have a lot of hope and a lot of faith, because I still believe, and because I think we'd be in a much, much worse place right now, way worse. And Trump would probably be in prison by now if there wasn't this, call it what you will, people, all right, white hats, working behind the scenes. As difficult as this is, they always said the ending is going to be for everybody, but we're in the ending. It's very difficult, and we still got some darkness to go through. But right now, let's pray for Julian. Keep him in your prayers tonight. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, share everything you can to Facebook and social media. You know where to find me. And I will talk to you guys later. Thanks.